The PSP had no business being as good a JRPG platform as it turned out to be. Sony's handheld launched in 2005 with promises of portable PS2 power and delivered something arguably better for the genre. A quiet, screen-lit device for long commutes and late nights, with a library that somehow accumulated ports, remasters, and original games from nearly every major Japanese RPG developer. Some are ports of earlier titles that remain the best way to play them. Some are built for the PSP specifically. All of them are worth your time. Star Ocean's Second Evolution is the PSP remake of Second Story, a 1998 PlayStation game that built a reputation as one of the most replayable JRPGs of its era by offering two selectable protagonists, a massive roster of optional party members, and a crafting system so elaborate that a significant portion of players spent more time in it than in the actual dungeons. Second Evolution brings the game to widescreen with new animated cutscenes by Production IG, full voice acting, and a redesigned world map, plus an additional playable character and 13 new endings that push the total to nearly 100. The skill-based crafting system is the engine the whole game runs on. Characters develop usable crafting abilities by leveling them through use, and combining their work produces items unavailable through any shop. The same recipe attempted by two characters with different skill levels produces different results. The item creation can absorb hours outside the main story entirely, and the game is quietly designed to encourage this. Selecting either Claude or Rena at the start shapes which party members are available and which story scenes play out. A full second playthrough as the other character changes the experience enough to feel worthwhile. The main weakness Second Evolution shares with its source is narrative. The story is generic fantasy for 2/3 of its runtime before the science fiction setting the title implies finally arrives, and the tonal shift lands awkwardly. But for players who want an RPG that rewards experimentation and has enough systems to explore that the main story almost becomes background texture, this remains one of the deepest games on the platform. Lunar Silver Star Harmony is the third remake of a game that started as a Sega CD title in 1992, and it's the best version of it. Game Arts rebuilt the visuals entirely for the PSP. Hand-drawn characters and backgrounds in full color, spell effects that use the hardware properly, and a new isometric perspective that makes towns feel inhabited in ways older versions couldn't manage. The animated cutscenes carried over from the PS1 release unchanged, which is the right call since they hold up. The composer rearranged the entire score with real instruments, replacing the PS1's MIDI output. Alex finally has a voice. It's the complete treatment. The story follows a farming village kid who idolizes the legendary Dragon Master Dine and sets out to become one, accumulating a small party, including the relentlessly cheerful Luna, the scrappy healer Jessica, the sardonic mercenary Kyle, and gradually uncovering what actually happened to Dine 15 years before the game begins. The writing is warm, funny, and occasionally sharp in the way the best 90s JRPGs were. The combat is turn-based with visible enemies on the field, position-based maneuvering during battles, and Art's limit break attacks borrowed from Lunar 2's improvements. It's not mechanically demanding. The challenge curve sits closer to accessible than punishing, and the dungeon design can be narrow and repetitive. The protagonist, Alex, is passive to the point of being a void at the center of a story that constantly celebrates him. The load times on UMD are real and frequent. None of this stops it from being a genuinely charming RPG with a cast worth spending 30 hours with, and the PSP version remains the best way to play it. Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII is a prequel built around Zack Fair, the soldier first class whose story runs directly into the opening of Final Fantasy VII, and it does something rare for a spin-off. It earns the ending it's building toward. The game is a real-time action RPG where combat runs on materia, cycling through shoulder buttons, with the digital mind wave slot machine spinning continuously in the corner of the screen. The DMW is divisive by design. It controls limit breaks, summons, and character level-ups entirely through random slot alignment. You can't grind for levels. They happen when the reels align. That randomness removes the sense of progress control that most RPGs rely on, and players either find it thrilling or infuriating depending on temperament. The materia fusion system is the mechanical highlight underneath the DMW controversy. Combine materia to create stronger variants. Fuse accessories and raw materials into them to add stat bonuses, and build a kit specific to your playstyle. The structure is mission-based. Over 300 side missions alongside the main story. Most of them short combat scenarios accessible from save points. The side missions are where the game's PSP origins show most clearly. They're bite-sized and repetitive. The main story compensates with production values that pushed the hardware visibly. The pre-rendered cutscenes looked like nothing else on a handheld in 2007. Zack's relationship with Aerith is the emotional core, and the epilogue, which begins exactly where FF7's opening minute starts, is one of the most affecting endings in the compilation. The 2022 Reunion Remaster is the most complete version of the game. John Dark is Level 5's only tactics game, and one of the best-looking RPGs the PSP ever produced, arriving in 2006 from a developer better known for Dragon Quest VIII and Dark Cloud than anything in the strategy space. The premise runs historical fiction through a fantasy filter. A young woman in medieval France finds a magical armlet that grants her the power to transform into a heavily armored warrior, and the English forces besieging her country have formed an alliance with literal demons. The historical cast all show up and do exactly what they did in actual history, except surrounded by supernatural conflict. The mechanics that make it stand out from other tactics games on the system are the burning aura system and the transformation armbands. When a character attacks an enemy, a burning aura appears in the space behind them. An ally standing in that aura attacks with improved accuracy and damage, and up to 3 auras can stack. Choreographing those chains, meaning moving units into position to create linked attacks through aura positioning, is what makes the moment-to-moment combat click. Jean and a handful of other characters can also transform mid-battle through armband charges, gaining extra turns after each enemy killed while transformed. The Sol Luna Stella Affinity Triangle adds another layer of enemy matchmaking on top. The writing is sharp, the pacing brisk for a tactics game, and the difficulty lands at the accessible end without feeling trivial. It was Japan and North America only for 17 years before a PS4, PS5 release in 2024 gave it a broader audience. Long overdue. The Legend of Heroes Trails in the Sky spent 7 years as a Japan-exclusive PSP game before Seed finally localized it in 2011. It's the first game in what became the Trails series, one of the most elaborately constructed JRPG universes ever built, and it starts with a deceptively modest premise. Estelle Bright and her foster brother Joshua are training to become bracers, a guild of problem solvers and protectors in the small kingdom of Liberal. Early chapters involve helping farmers and investigating missing persons reports. There are no world-ending stakes announced in the first act. The game builds its world sideways before building it upward. What Falcom does here that almost no other RPG developer attempts at this scale is make every NPC in every town a real person with a name, a daily routine, and dialogue that changes after each major story event. The farm outside Roland supplies the cafe in town, and when monsters overrun the farm, the cafe mentions the supply problems. These connections accumulate until the world feels inhabited rather than populated. The tactical combat uses visible enemies on the field, a turn order queue visible at all times, arts and crafts drawing from separate resource pools, and the S-craft system for interrupting enemy turns with charged special attacks. The complaint most often leveled at the game is completely accurate. It ends on a cliffhanger and requires the sequel to resolve it. It's 1/3 of story arc by design, not accident. For players who can accept that contract up front, what's here is among the most carefully crafted RPG world building available on the platform. Persona 3 Portable isn't the definitive version, and it knows it. The PS2 version has fully animated cutscenes, explorable 3D environments, and the answer epilogue. P3P stripped all of that down to static visual novel presentation and point-and-click navigation through menus to fit on a UMD, and then added something neither the original nor FES has. A second complete playthrough as a female protagonist with entirely different social links, new romance options, adjusted dialogue, an alternate Velvet Room, attendant named Theodore, and a new battle theme. For returning players, this amounts to a substantially new game wearing familiar armor. The new protagonist, called FemC in community shorthand, gave Atlas space to revisit every social link and rethink them through a different relational lens. 8 of the 22 social links are completely original characters accessible only on her route. Male party members become romance options with full arcs that don't exist on the male route. The combat improvements from Persona 4 carried over. Direct control over every party member rather than relying on AI decisions. Downed enemies recovering without wasting a turn, and allies able to take a fatal blow to protect the protagonist. Quick saves anywhere and streamlined travel make it the fastest and most portable-friendly version. The visual novel presentation does lose something real. The PS2 cutscenes gave certain moments a weight that static portraits and text can't fully replicate. But FemC's route arguably tells the better story, and any version of Persona 3 on a long commute or late night is worth the time invested.
Pray that we shall meet again.
Valkyrie Profile Lilith is a 1999 PlayStation game that arrived on the PSP in 2006 and felt like it had been designed specifically for that format. Not because it was built for handheld play, but because its stop-and-go structure of brief sessions, tight chapters, and portable compartmentalization suits a handheld device naturally. The premise draws from Norse mythology. Lilith is a Valkyrie tasked by Odin with collecting the souls of the recently dead, training them as Einherjar warriors for the coming Ragnarok, and sending the best of them to Valhalla. Each recruited soul comes with a death scene, a short, often devastating vignette about their mortal life, delivered in the 2D side-scrolling visual style the game uses throughout. The dungeons are side-scrolling platformers where Lilith jumps, climbs, and fires crystal projectiles to create footholds. Combat is real-time in layout, but command-based in execution. Each of the 4 face buttons controls one party member, and attacking in sequence chains combo hits into elemental triggered finishers. You have 8 chapters before Ragnarok. Every action costs periods, dungeon exploration, spiritual concentration to locate new souls, sacred phase evaluation by Freya. Managing those periods is the resource management loop underlying everything else. It is, by honest assessment, an obtuse game. The true ending requires specific, unannounced conditions across multiple chapters and almost certainly needs a guide. The in-game map is nearly unusable. The load times on UMD are frequent, but the Einherjar vignettes, the combat system, and the visual storytelling of a Valkyrie navigating the dying moments of mortals add up to something unlike any other RPG on the platform.
And take this!
E7 is the game that changed what ease is. Before it, the series was almost exclusively a one-man affair. Adol Kristen alone, blazing through enemies with momentum-based attacks, and solving dungeons through reflexes and pattern recognition. 7 added a 3-person party with real-time character switching, element-based weapon vulnerabilities that require rotating between party members to exploit, and a flash guard system that rewards precise defensive timing. Falcom wasn't sure the change would land, and had a fallback version ready in case it didn't. It landed. Every Ys game since has kept the party system. Set in Aldego, a country inspired by ancient Carthage. The story follows Adol and Dogi as they investigate a series of earthquakes and discover the 5 dragons of Aldego are awakening to address a threat older than memory. The narrative is longer and more involved than any previous entries, which is both a strength and the source of its main pacing problem. The story starts slow, and the backtracking to previously visited dungeons with new equipment to clear blocked paths, wears on players who came for forward momentum. The bosses, by contrast, are the best the series had produced to that point. Enormous enemies with distinct phase patterns, timed to Falcom Sound Team JDK's hard rock soundtrack in ways that feel choreographed rather than incidental. The world design is also the largest in the series up to that point, with fast travel eventually addressing. Hex's Force is Sting at their most accessible, which is a deliberate choice from a developer better known for games that actively resist accessibility. Most of Sting's Department Heaven titles make learning them through confusion a feature. Hex's Force makes a different bet. A clean, traditional turn-based RPG with a dual protagonist structure, twin campaigns playable in either order, and a resource system replacing conventional shops entirely. The Ragnafact and Forcefact weapon system is the mechanical identity of the game. Ragnafacts are persistent, holy weapons that cost RP, the game's MP equivalent, for every action including basic attacks, and are upgraded with force points earned from battle. Forcefacts are equipped items with finite uses providing attacks, heals, and buffs. Every dungeon restore point and crafting choice involves managing the balance between these two resource pools across a full run. There are no shops. All items are created by fusing field materials, and the crafting system is the most streamlined Sting had yet produced. The two campaigns follow Cleric Cecilia and Knight Levant through versions of the same world crisis from opposite perspectives, meeting at specific story junctions but otherwise running separately. The stories are not remarkable. Chosen One frameworks, ancient sealed evil, personality types built from familiar archetypes. The game is honest about its conventionality and commits to executing it well rather than subverting it. For the specific appetite of a clean, well-paced, portable JRPG, Hex's Force delivers reliably. Riviera: The Promised Land is the oldest game on this list and the strangest. Originally a WonderSwan color game from 2002, remade for the GBA in 2004, and ported to PSP in 2006 with full voice acting and additional scenes, it exists entirely outside the grammar of conventional JRPGs. You don't move on through the world by walking. Screens are navigated via directional prompts. Press right to move to the next area. Press a button to examine an object. Examination costs trigger points earned from battles. Opening certain treasure chests costs TP. Running out of TP before the chapter ends means missing items permanently. The game controls Ein's movement so completely that the developer essentially built a linear adventure game wearing JRPG clothes. Battles are turn-based and weapon-based. Characters don't have traditional learned skills. Their abilities come from the items they're carrying, which can be used in limited quantities. Running out of items limits what a character can contribute. This creates a resource tension across chapters, balancing which items to use, which to conserve, which to sacrifice in a pinch, within an inventory cap of 16 items and no shops anywhere in the game. Ein travels with 4 female companions whose affection ratings shift based on dialogue choices, item sharing, and who gets the killing blow in combat. The ending changes based on who has the highest affection. The PSP version adds dual language audio, more CG scenes, and an extra chapter exclusive to the North American release. An HD remaster arrived for PC and mobile in 2024. The music in any version is outstanding throughout. Wild Arms XF is one of the most mechanically distinctive tactics games on the PSP and one of the least appreciated. The Wild Arms series arrived at tactical RPG territory through its own PS2 entries, which used a hexagonal grid instead of the standard square layout, and XF carried that forward, which means every unit has 6 directional options for positioning instead of 4, and the formation art system rewards surrounding an enemy in lines, triangles, or full circles with stacking damage bonuses. The geometry of combat is genuinely different from most of the genre as a result. The job system is the other structural contribution. 16 base classes exist, each with unique skills that can be carried over and mixed into other class loadouts. The Vitality Point system acts as a time limit on each battle. VP depletes each turn by equipment weight, and once it reaches 0, HP drains instead until only 1 point remains, creating an endgame of attrition when fights run long. It forces efficiency rather than grinding through attrition. Mission objectives vary significantly across the game's 60-plus stages. Some are straight combat. Many are objective-based with specific win conditions, and a few are essentially tactical puzzles where figuring out the correct approach is the entire challenge. The writing is the weakest element. Protagonist Clarissa's story of impersonating a dead princess to lead a rebellion against an evil council is competent but thin. The soundtrack, though, is outstanding. For composers, 4 discs of material, and none of it is forgettable. XF flew entirely under the radar and has never been ported or re-released.